Business is simple. It's just not easy. We focus on three things to help you run and grow your business more easily: talent, sales, and how to scale. This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Hey, everyone. Brian Whittington with this episode of the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. We have Todd Rode. So it's R-O-D-E. The E is a, how do you say?
It's the long E.
Long E. There you go. I don't know how to do that stuff. So Todd Rode, and he comes to us from Stratasan. He's the Vice President of Sales Operations. So you might hear it called RevOps. You might call it Sales Ops, whatever we're calling it. Todd really knows what in the world he's doing. So the reason we had Todd on is, one, an introduction. So thanks so very much for that introduction. And we had talked about how he was working at a couple of different places. He comes out of the military, which I have a lot of respect for. So he's out of the military academy at West Point. So for you military folks, yes, he is a ring knocker, but we still like him. He came out of Nissan.
Me, please.
What's that?
Don't hold that against me for those out there.
There you go. So he comes out of Nissan. He's been with, sales development, director of sales development of Reltio, and really cut his teeth there and has continued that success at Stratasan. So all of that to say, welcome, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think you usually have your guests kind of ask or talk about why they should care, why they should listen. So I appreciate that introduction. It saves me the embarrassment of having to qualify everything. I guess it's why speakers always have someone introduce them, so they don't have to
precisely
say, right. They don't have to say, I'm amazing. They can say, she said I was amazing, right?
All right, now it's time for you to live up to it. So, all right, Todd, you asked the first question. Why in the world should they listen to you? About how in the world do you build out a sales development team, and especially with the fact that you have a focus, yes, on sales, but really from that operational bent. So why should we listen to you on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have been in sales for about 15 years. Right out of the military, I carried a bag. I took a brief hiatus to go to business school. Then I jumped right back in, and most of my experience has been at the intersection of sales ops and sales dev. And so I've scaled, started and scaled two BDR teams or SDR teams from scratch. About 3 dozen or so total team members across those teams. And I could not be more proud of their results. These folks, came into sales, had never sold anything in their life, and between all those team members, collectively about $120 million of pipeline and a little over $30 million of deals closed as a result of that pipeline. So those deals would not have existed without them making those calls. And so and I just kind of getting to the heart of all this, that intersection of sales ops and sales dev. I'm always thinking about what you and Ryan are always talking about, which is the math of sales. It comes back to that. So we can talk about all of those things.
Well, let's go back a little bit, unpack that. So you went from two BDRs, SDRs, or whatever we want to call it, XDRs, right? So this was all outbound demand generation, or was it inbound lead conversion? Is a combination of both?
All outbound. So that 120 that I talked about in those deals, that's just the outbound side of things. My team also did cover inbound, and my current team does as well. But I'm just referring to the deals where no one was coming and knocking on our door. People had never heard of us, and the conversation would not have happened without that BDR team or SDR team doing the outreach.
Okay, so we'll call it in terms of this, because everybody calls it differently. For today's conversation, if we can define some terms, we'll call SDR that sales development rep, which is the outbound demand generation. And if you're okay with that, for all those listening, don't yell at me if you call that BDR.
My last company called them SDRs. My current company calls them BDRs. And so if I use those two interchangeably, I apologize for the confusion.
Oh, no, perfect. So we'll counter that, and we'll even call it an XDR. So, somebody doing this work. So now, did you say that you went from 2 to 36? Did I hear that correctly?
About 3 dozen total across the two teams that I've started. So I actually went from 4 to then 6 to 9 to office move to moved offices a couple times actually in that first team. To eventually we had 17 members, 2 managers, and myself in that first team, handling inbound and outbound. So SDRs who mainly did outbound, but also did have an inbound component. So they handled that for the company. And then my current role started off with 3 and has gone to 6.
Okay, so you've doubled that size as well. Now, with those 17 SDRs and two managers, were they supporting AEs? Were they supporting customer service? Talk to us a little bit about that. Who were those 17 supporting?
They were supporting account executives. So a
Okay.
geographic and industry matrix that we built to actually across the country, and eventually we actually went global. But within we had a solution that covered a variety of industries, and so but always at the enterprise level.
Okay, and those AEs, what was the ratio? 17 inside to how many AEs?
So we started with a one-to-one, moved to a one-to-one account executive to SDR, moved to a two-to-one just because of scale of account executives to SDRs. So each account executive really only had about half of an SDR's time. And then we started getting creative and started specializing and kind of did a hybrid between the one-to-one and the two-to-one.
Okay.
And what's interesting is in my current role, we actually have a two-to-one the opposite way. We have two-to-one SDRs to account executives, and it's a whole different world that I'm happy to jump into.
Well, yeah. Okay. So so I'll have a couple of different questions here, and I'll try to break it up. So, first question is, what was the difference between when you went 2-to-1 versus 1-to-1? Because you said that you were doing both at the same time at the original. So, what was the difference there? Why the difference?
Absolutely. So when we specialized in certain industries, especially in industries where we didn't have a lot of headway, we needed to have special training for the SDR, and we also needed to have special focus to build that pipeline. So new industry, typically bringing in someone with outside experience with that focus area, and so it was not something that we had done before, and so we really wanted to concentrate and get that person a running or a head start. And so the one-to-one focus with the SDR, and also the specialized training for the SDR in that area so they could speak to it a little more fluently.
Okay. And how about when you went to the 2-to-1?
The two-to-one, which way? The two-to-one SDR to
I think you said 2 AEs to 1.
Yeah, so that was where in areas where we had a little more experience historically as a company, and I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest, because of the additional conversations that take place around how is my SDR spending his or her time from the account executive, and trying to, and it almost becomes is his cookie bigger than my cookie? And I mean, I would have conversations with certain account executives where I actually had to set up specific dashboards that would show number of calls and numbers of meetings by, with the SDR for each account executive. So I could say, no, her cookie is not bigger than your cookie. Cookie's exact, it's 52%, 48% as far as meetings delivered and deals created. And then, and ideally the conversation wouldn't escalate beyond there. It was like, I promise you, there's no favoritism here. Your SDR is supporting you equally. It just makes it, I can tell you, going to the one-to-one, that conversation goes away. Going to the 2-to-1 the other direction, the 2 SDRs to 1 account executive, meetings, pipeline, deals galore. No one is complaining. So
right,
if you can do it, I recommend doing it.
Okay, now let's talk. So you laid out a couple of things. So for a new market, you went 1-to-1. So I'm having to, break the fallowed ground, right? So I have to dig that up. So that 1-to-1. Now, when I was doing that 1-to-1 or even 2-to-1 with 2 AEs to 1 SDR, how much were you asking that AE to support themselves with some amount of lead generation?
It was there, and also is at my current company. We're looking for about 10 to 15% of their own. And so
Okay.
we bring up a great point, which is also part of the math of sales. Each revenue generating or pipeline generating group needs to have a number. You need to have and I know attribution, that's a whole other, we could spend several of these talking about lead attribution. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, necessarily, at least not to its full extent. But there needs to be a sense of responsibility toward each group, because that helps marshal your resources. And so in that company, about 10 to 15% was on the account executive shoulders to go out there and beat the brush themselves, in addition to what the BDRs were doing for them, or the SDRs.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, and just kind of thinking out loud, any reason not to have that AE take over the inbound lead conversion and just strictly have the SDRs do the outbound demand generation? Had you tried that? Is that a horrible idea?
We talked about that, and what we landed on is if there's different. I like to think about inbound as people knocking on doors, right? And
Right.
so someone's coming and knocking on your door. Now they might be pounding on it. They really want to come in. They've actually clicked that box or filled out that form that says, "I want a meeting now," if that's one of your options. There's also on the other end of the spectrum, there's people that have maybe they were walking past the door and they lightly or accidentally brushed it, and they don't necessarily want to engage with you. And so and they are, those aren't the extremes. The kind of the fat middle that we found where the reason why we want the SDRs to go ahead and handle that is because there is a degree of qualification and chasing that takes place. And depending on how marketing is set up, the lead scoring or how you've agreed upon that lead scoring is not every MQL is basically equal or created equal, as I'd say. Not everyone's pounding on that door. For the ones who are pounding, the ones who have filled out that form and said, "I want a meeting," the account executive is perfectly capable of handling that, and I think should. Everybody else, there's going to be a degree of chasing and qualifying. Let the account executive has better things to do with their time. The company's paying them to do bigger things with their time. The SDR can do that. Have the SDR do that.
Got it. So you're looking at really, you didn't say this, but almost like a lead scoring. If they hit this level, then it goes to AE. Otherwise, yeah, because you're right. I mean, you get so many people, you get somebody's grandmother, your competitors that are downloading it, people that just found the information interesting. So that's where you want to sift and sort through that BDR, SDR role. So I understood that.
And I want to add to that as well. We do have, there's an element of SDR variable compensation, a small element, but there is an element for that chasing and qualification that has to take place. It's to make it, it's just to make it more palatable. The SDRs know they're coming. It could be low hanging fruit, but it might not be. They don't always convert to meetings. And so it's to give them a little bit of incentive to say, "Hey, look, our SLA is 5 to 10 minutes for these. Once we light it up in Slack that they're MQLs, once they've been assigned, here's a small financial incentive to make, just to reinforce that." And for those who are thinking, why would you do that? It's part of their job. Yes, and when I haven't done that in the past, guess what? Guess what ends up in the priority ranking order? What ends up at the very bottom? That lead I got to chase down.
Correct.
Just
it's still the work.
Yeah, it is work. Absolutely.
Yeah, because we referenced this a couple of episodes ago with Ryan Reisert. I think it was 43 or something like that. I can't remember the number, but we're talked about. Chris Walker said that 1% of all MQLs end up closing, and Ryan referenced HubSpot where 2% back in 2015 went. So there's a lot of work that has to go into this, and then nurturing and following up afterwards to get that next quarter or the quarter after, so this doesn't all go to waste. So it seems like that's what you were finding as well.
Absolutely. For our company, it's the third best conversion rate is anything inbound. The best is business development. So anything partner or account executive source that comes into us. Second best is SDR or outbound, and the third best is inbound. Absolutely.
Oh, interesting. So let me feed that back to you a little bit differently. So what you're saying, the best is personal network from partner level, executive level, then SDR, outbound demand generation, found somebody that woke up this morning, didn't even think that they had an issue, and that SDR skillfully got them to realize, holy cow, I need some help. And then it goes to marketing qualified lead. Did I hear that right? Because there's going to be a lot of people that say, "You're all wet on that, Todd. No way."
Absolutely. And it might be a little bit, so our company is a little bit newer in terms of commercialization or product, product fit and kind of post revenue relative to the last company I came from. As we scaled, there was actually, they started off like a lot of companies where your partner sourcing and your business development, your word of mouth, what made up 90% of their deals, and that shrunk to 10% in the 3 years I was there. And so I imagine that it'll follow that same curve for us as well. And in fact, this year, the BDR team alone is responsible for 60%, or our attribution number is 60%. Last year was 25%.
Nice. Okay. And that's what we
want. The team, we've more than doubled the responsibility.
And that's what we want, right, gang? So now, difference between Reltio and Stratasan. So is it were they both enterprise? Were they both right? So they're both enterprise. He's nodding his head. Yes.
I've always worked in enterprise. So that is one thing I did want to mention for anybody listening. Anything that I'm talking about, if I'm throwing out a number of dials per day, if I'm mentioning conversion rates or deal size, I'm talking about the complex sale. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars annual contract value for these, six plus month deal cycle, all multiple decision makers, all of those things, calling high in the pyramid as far as decision makers for my team. So I want to throw that as a qualifier for anybody saying, wait a minute, that math doesn't add up. Just want to get that out of the way.
Okay, so let's beat up that idea for a little bit, and then we'll get to the to a couple of other key questions here. So, what are maybe some of the metrics that you're looking for from your team? Share as much as you're willing to, and we'll take good notes.
Absolutely. So there's 4 key metrics that we're looking for from my team.
Okay.
And there's a reason behind them. One I already mentioned is there is a very small component of your inbound qualification, or your inbound meeting delivered and converting to a deal. So actually stepping back just a half step, all of our metrics for BDR variable compensation have to do with meetings delivered. So someone actually showing up on a meeting and then conversion to a deal. The reason why I stop there and I don't go to deals, qualifying to stage 3, there's a trigger there. A deal closing, there's a trigger there, is because of the type of business we're in. So many things happen between the time a deal is or meeting is delivered and a deal is created and that deal closing or converting to whatever stage that the BDR has zero control over. That our quality measure, so that the meeting delivered is the quantity measure, the deal conversion for the BDRs is the extent of the quality measure. And so there's a very small bit of compensation. Less than 20% of the variable compensation is going to come from anything that's inbound related. And so a deal being, or a meeting being delivered or a deal being created is going to be on the inbound side. The vast majority, more than 80% of their compensation is going to be from delivering outbound meetings and those deals converting, or those meetings converting to deals.
Okay, so you're on inbound meetings kept or delivered, and then deals closed off of inbound, and then reverse for outbound. Outbound meetings delivered and outbound meetings closed. Is that it? Is that right?
So meetings delivered, someone showing up, and then the account executive choosing to make that into a stage 1 deal. So conversion to deal is the other trigger. That's our quality measure.
Okay, got it. So it's deal converting to pipeline, not necessarily deal closing.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. So others might call that a sales accepted lead or something like that.
Sure. And the thing is, you just brought up a great point too, that one of the things I wanted to mention that was actually, I believe it was Amy Volas had a recent LinkedIn post around this, was that words do matter in this business, and handoffs matter, and other things really do matter. The more you can socialize and get on the same page around, when you say sales accepted lead, and I say sales, or if I say deal converted, or you say stage 3, or I say MQL, everybody has to understand what those things mean in the organization. It's an agreement. It's not that I'm going to tell marketing what this is. We need to get together as a team and speak the same language. If not, you're going to be dealing with headaches forever.
All right, so let me push back on you there, right? I can just hear it now. Everyone's like, that's because you're sales operations. We don't need that. Just go out and sell stuff. What would you say to that person?
Absolutely. And it's because I've had, as a sales operations, I find myself in the middle of the person trying to be the objective arbiter of just saying, hey, look, here's what it says in the CRM. Here's the conversation I had with the account executive. Here's the one-on-one I just had with my boss, the CRO. Here's the conversation, my twice weekly, one-on-one session with marketing. So I have all these things, and here's what I think happened. You can eliminate a lot of those things if you have common definitions and common agreements. It should not be if an account exec, if there are verifiable outcomes, or when there are verifiable outcomes, meaning things that can be verified for something to either move forward or back in the sales process over many months. If you have to have a pain clearly identified your company can solve, a number or an amount of evaluation for that deal, specific products mapped to that, having spoken to the decision maker, et cetera, et cetera. You can make as many of these as you like per stage. If those are the requirements for something to be a stage 3 deal, and everybody understands that, then when you say stage 3, or when the account executive says stage 3 and the sales leadership says stage 3, and we brief that to the board as far as our quarterly report, and we say, marketing, here's how many stage 3 deals we have, everybody knows what a stage 3 deal means, right? It just
And that's
so many headaches.
but it's critical, right? Because the CFO needs that for forecasting. We need that, especially if I'm startup. I need that for my investment team to get more funding as we go along. I also need that for a predictable revenue model, that if it's at stage 3 or whatever you're going to call it, that it goes back to that checklist manifesto, if you will, of here's everything that you need in order to get there. And if it's not there, it's not stage 3. So that accountability helps out, and I can then be self-accountable as a salesperson. I don't need you riding my tail about, hey, this should be closing. Well, I missed this, and this, so now I need to go back, and now I have a pathway forward. I mean, it's really just project management, for goodness sakes.
Absolutely, and trust me, at least no sales operations person I know loves beating up anybody. We're all just trying to keep the peace, do the forecasting, the pipeline, basically keep score correctly. And to your point too, there's others that are affected in this conversation. In the current company, when something hits a stage 3 deal, a CSM gets assigned because we want them part of the conversation early. So now if we're pulling in CSMs a month or two too early and things go back to stage 2, now we've assigned a CSM and we pulled them away from something else. So you see how the flow, and our CFO starts salivating. Ooh, we got a stage 3 deal, and I know we have a high closure rate. We have a 95% closure rate when something hits stage 3. That's money in the bank. Whoa,
yeah, he's already spending it.
hold on a second. Now I have to have that conversation with her, and it's like, ooh, sorry, that's actually no, that some of these have moved back to stage 2. So now I have to put an asterisk next to that 95% close rate because it's not really 95%. No one wants to have that conversation, especially not me.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, now I'm going to go way back to the very beginning. You said that of those 36, oftentimes there are people that have never sold. Did I hear that right?
Absolutely. 100% of those that I've recruited and trained, some of them are account executives now, some of them are managers running their own teams. Not one of them was a professional salesperson before they came on and did this.
Okay, so let me make sure that we're on the same page here, right? So whenever you say they've never sold before, is that never sold before as any sales position like XDR, SDR, BDR, or is it they've never been an AE? Or so never sold before is just that?
No enterprise SDR experience whatsoever.
Okay, so they may have had SDR experience at a non-enterprise?
We had a couple that had actually had door-to-door sales.
Okay.
And we had a couple that had done non-enterprise, but that's the vast minority of those that had come in and joined the team.
So I would think most people would say you're crazy, Todd, for trying this. So how in the world did you get 36 of these folks that have never sold before to be that effective, where you're doubling, tripling opportunity size with not doubling, tripling headcount? So talk me through that. What were you looking for in these folks?
Absolutely. And you talk about it a little bit in the intro to your podcast when you're talking about focusing on the talent side, and then also deciding and putting out there in the world what's an acceptable person or acceptable set of qualities so you can join our team. And it's really about, part of it is about culture and understanding what's going to work. But as far as a salesperson, there's so much information around there. And I'd say in some cases, in a lot of cases, disinformation around, it's got to be a college grad, D1 school, male, former athlete, all those things. I will tell you, sure. And I also have a 47-year-old on my team right now, non-college grad, went straight into the military. I had, others who are pre-med students in school, and all kinds of disciplines. If you take out all of those noisy filters of the academics, the sports, the age, the gender, whatever other filters that you're hearing out there that people are saying, well, I had success with this, that's great, and it might work for you. For me, it's all about the attitude. I want people who want it. I want people who want to make a career in sales or think they want to make a career in sales. And I want people who are hungry. And yes, you can interview for hunger. And I highly recommend, we can talk about some of those questions, but I screen, one of the things I'm screening for is I want people who are going to get after it. I want hungry people.
So let's go reverse then. Off of hunger, what are some of the ways that you're identifying that? Because that is a real challenge, right? So for example, we take assessments, and we have some specific ways of looking at it. I'd love to hear how you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking for things like, another way of saying, hungry, or another way of defining it is things like perseverance through adversity. So I'm looking for people who have had one of the questions I ask in my interviews is tell me about a time when you experienced something that was extremely difficult and maybe you didn't think you were going to be able to get through, or even better, tell me about a time when you failed and how you came back from that. And I'm looking for a few things. I've had a few extreme examples when people have told me that they haven't failed. Thank you very
I
much.
want them.
Thank you for your time today. Good luck out there, because it's just not true. We've all failed, but I want to know more. I'm looking for things like, what did you learn from it? How quickly did you respond and get back? Take me through whether you use the STAR framework or whatever the case is. I'm looking for acceptance of the failure. So I'm looking for someone to be self-aware enough to say, hey, look, I screwed up or I failed. And to me, the bigger the failure, the better. You failed out of college, or you failed a class, or you got fired from a job. Awesome. Tell me more. What did you learn from that? And then what have you done since then to make yourself better? That stuff's great. Bring it. So I'm looking for things like that. And I'm looking for grit, looking for people that persevered over, against odds, and over a period of time, and how they've accepted their own role in that and what they've learned from that.
Yeah, so you just said something there, that self-responsibility is rather critical, right? So you and I both coming out of the military, we always had to take that extreme ownership. So there's that book by the name Extreme Ownership, where you're not a victim. I can't blame COVID. I can't blame market. I can't blame elections. I can't blame whatever.
Nope.
It's okay because of that. What are you going to do about it? And so that's self-responsibility.
I
Now,
love that book. Jocko Willink, I think, is the one you're talking about.
yes,
We've all
exactly.
seen, or I think some of us have seen. There's that LinkedIn video that's circulating around where the guy he's going through like the 36 sales excuses, and he talks through and he's like, who wrote that email? Marketing, and where did these leads come from? And well, I mean, it was raining outside, and it's as salespeople sometimes. I've carried a bag before. The easiest thing as salespeople, as human beings, to do is to what? Is to not, I mean, come on, man. It wasn't my fault. It was raining outside. I mean, come on. Everyone knows that when it rains outside, you don't sell anything.
It's Monday morning.
We so easily want to deflect the blame onto something else. The minute you realize that you're co-creating that environment or that engagement, and that no matter what, you have a sense of responsibility, maybe not 100% of it, but that you were there and you contributed. The minute you accept that and you choose to learn from that, it opens up so much. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's empowering. So you're no longer a victim. Now, what
Yep.
would you say the difference between hunger and grit is? Is there any difference there, or just another way of saying the same thing?
There's actually a great book that's called Grit by that name that I highly recommend that talks a little bit about this. And the author's her definition is that that grit is perseverance over time, essentially.
Okay.
And I apologize if I'm messing up her definition. But that was my understanding of it, that it's someone who is stuck to something again and again and again and really chosen to focus in an area, and again, despite the adversity, to come back.
Okay, so you're differentiating hunger as being able to face adversity and get over it and have that drive, and grit is that continued ongoing fight, that 10 years that it takes to be the expert, or longer in some cases, right?
The 10,000 hours, or the whatever the definition is. Right? So it's almost like grit is hunger over time.
Yeah, there you go, hunger it over time. So, okay, so these folks never sold. So if they've never sold, and I've hired for their attitude, I've hired for attitude and culture. Let's put it in that way, just to overly simplify it. How much were you looking for their skill set, or did you believe that you could train them if they had the right culture fit and attitude? Did you just say, I can train you?
Absolutely, and that was the attitude I had, and maybe that's crazy. It's something that I got. One of the things that I learned from the military is that when you get a group of determined people together with a common mission, you can train them to do any kind of technical task there is. Now, not everyone's going to be an expert, but there are things I did in the Army that I had never done before that I ended up being able to do pretty well. And so I showed up and I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure this out. That's why I'm training. That's why I'm hiring for that, for that grit, for that hunger, for that attitude, and that cultural fit, like you said, is that I can train you how to sell. I can't train you to want it. And I certainly can't. If I want it more than you do, that's a recipe for disaster. That just can't happen.
Yeah, 100%. So, marking a couple of different things here down, because what you just said is that problem solving, right? Because I think especially now, as or even more so in the enterprise space, if that person can't solve problems on their own, if they don't have that critical problem solving mentality, or a skeptical curiosity, or questioning strategy, right? That mindset of asking questions, that seems to be a real challenge, is what I found, is where when people don't work out, it's because they can't effectively problem solve, they're not asking questions, and they're not taking responsibility for that. That's been my experience. I don't know if I'm unique in that or not.
You just hit on another thing that I'm screening for in the interviews is curiosity. And I'm looking for things like, I'll just throw out a huge, what I think is a big softball question, just that one right over the plate, which is, what did you find about our website that interested you? Or what did you read on the website that you just didn't understand? Like, there's a lot of, I've always managed to work in industries that are, like, I'm in healthcare data analytics right now. I came from a world that was master data management software, prediction markets at a Consensus Point before that. And so I always managed to find, like, the most difficult thing to sell, it seems like. And so if you're not curious, if you don't try to stumble through what the heck, we're doing, you're not gonna do very well here. You're just not.
Yeah, and that goes to and again, I don't want to overly simplify it, but I always look to align their talent with the passion with our culture. So if their passion for that position and passion for our mission doesn't align, and then they miss on culture, that's never going to fit. And if they miss on any one of those three, that's not going to fit. So it seems like you're looking for that same thing, that alignment of, because it's insane to me that they show up, Todd, and you're like, so what about this were you thinking about, or what about this did you like? Oh, it's newer innovative technology.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, looks like you're doing a lot of interesting things in the marketplace.
Yeah. Oh, you're a startup. Yeah. I love startups.
Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're a startup, and you're gonna go out there and you're gonna help grow a space in the market or something like that. Yes, and yeah, right. Us and every other business out there, I hope,
So, and that goes to really being, so whenever we're interviewing these people, and you brought up the STAR acrostic, that's a behavioral interviewing tactic. So you mind, and I can't remember it right off the top of my head, so I don't mean to put you on the spot. STAR stands for, do you remember that? And you can say, no, I forget it because I have it marked down somewhere if you don't.
Yeah, it's the gist of it is what was the situation? What's the action that you took? Or the situation, the tactic, the action, and the result, I think. I
something like that. We'll look it up. If you have a question, just ping Todd or me, and I have it written down somewhere. But anyway, that it's really behavioral interviewing is what that is.
It's not what would you do, it's what did you do, and you can ferret out a fake story pretty quickly.
Yes, and how can you do that? How do you ferret out that fake story? Because you can ferret out the fact that we know that you know what you're talking about because of this reason. So how can you ferret out those fake stories?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of it is the detail. Unless the person is really is just an amazingly good liar, and there's some that are out there.
There are
that they're going to be short on details. A lot of generalizations. And maybe even slipping into from the I did to the I would. Well, what did you do? What did you actually do? And
so that active listening is critical.
Absolutely. And I'll give grace in interviews. I'll say, look, this is a difficult question. And in some cases I'll say, everybody hates this question. This is the failure question I ask. You're not going to like it. I apologize in advance, but I got to ask you. And I'll give them a moment. In some cases, I'll throw out my own. I got plenty of failures to choose from. Let me give you one of mine to set you up. I will model the behavior that I want and see if they can follow along.
Oh, there's so many nuggets there. There's nuggets on how do you get somebody comfortable to open up and transparency using on interview or sales, modeling of leadership that let me go first and show my vulnerability to let you that this is a safe space. There's so much in here, gang. Get these little nuggets. All right, can I move from this or other final thoughts on that?
Absolutely.
All right, so here's the next step. So we've identified these people, brand new people. How in the world do we onboard them? How do we get them from I'm a absolute rookie, don't know anything about this. How do I go from first day new hire orientation to being an effective revenue generating machine? How do I shorten that down? What's that look like?
Absolutely. And by the way, I have to give a lot of credit. There's a guy out there, if you're not familiar with him, named Greg Casale. Runs a company up in the Boston area called Reveneer. Reveneer, Reveneer. I cut my teeth on the sales ops, sales dev side, really, learning at his feet. He's a student of this business. He has Reveneer is an outbound sales dev or outsourced sales dev group up there. He has dozens of team members that are doing this for companies all over the country. And so Greg Casale is the guy that I'll give credit for teaching me how to do this properly, as far as the specifics to training SDRs.
Okay.
And the idea is that you go through and you break down the elements of what it's like to actually be an SDR. And you're gonna do your training. He starts off with talking about why are we doing this? So why do we call? And breaks down the conversion rates of calls versus emails versus voicemails versus social versus everything else, carrier pigeon, snail mail, those things. We talk about, so we get the why are we here? And then we go through and we talk about, and he actually maps it directly to the organization. And so we talk about exactly who are you sourcing and why. And so we have to be crystal clear as an organization, who do we want the SDRs to go after and why? And I'm talking specific, I can get to the specifics around the keywords and the levels. So when you think about, it's not just title, when you think about the personas that you want, you're talking about their keywords in their title and their levels on that organizational hierarchy that you're looking for, tied to specific situations and content. That's a persona.
So let me feed that back to you maybe in a little bit different way. So really, it's not just ICP, that ideal customer profile, but you're looking at call it the trifecta, if you will: management level, C-suite, VP, director, management, blah blah blah. Right. So that management level, also the business function, as well as keywords in the title. Is that kind of summing up what you just said there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So we get those ideal targets, that trifecta in there. What else are we looking for?
So you're doing it real time. All of the breakout sessions, all of the coaching off of that, of the homework comes from, all right, now I'm gonna teach you a set of tools now related to sourcing. And this is, it no matter how big your tech stack is, you can do this. So you can have, if all you have is a CRM and either a free or premium version of LinkedIn, if that's what you got, go with it. You can use that. You can also pair up if you have something like a Zoom info where you're actually finding the direct dial and email information for those folks and verifying where they are. You can start triangulating with the internet, and you can also layer in there are industry specific tools that you can use, and you teach how to do what I call is triangulation. So I'm going to find Brian Whittington, who's here, works for this company. I'm going to go on LinkedIn, verify that. I'm actually going to go find your direct dial and your email information I'm going to verify that in something like a Zoom info. There's also ways that you can figure out how to tease out someone's email address by, there's ways that you can do that on using Google and other things. And then I'm going to verify within that if I have an industry specific tool. We use something called Definitive within the healthcare industry that's specific to the healthcare industry. That's the third, or in some cases even the fourth leg of that stool. And between those sources, now I know that is the Brian Whittington that I want. That's my guy. And so now I've verified. Now I have the right. I know why I'm calling this person or why I'm reaching out, and I have the right person. Those are the first couple steps.
Okay, and then
this is real time, by the way. We're doing this with real. We actually before the SDR even starts, we already know what accounts they're going to go after.
Okay, got it. So they do all of that. So the research, the list building, right? So just to simplify it here, yeah. But then how do we go from okay, you've got that, now the tactical execution of this? How do we go from do you do any of that, or do you just, here you go, guys, good luck, here's your phone, good luck, gals,
Yeah.
there's your
Oh yeah, of
email.
course. There's the phone. Have fun.
Yeah.
So then we go into, so now you know why you're calling people. You have the people. How do you call? So then we go into the tools and the techniques of actually calling, and that's where the bulk of this is talking about the psychology and the structure of how a call works. And there's an art and a science component to this.
Okay.
So, as an example of that, you know as well as anybody in sales that you will encounter objections. 100% will encounter objections. And there's two basically broad categories of objections. Greg describes them one way. I've actually taken it down a little bit of path related to the psychology that I teach around this. I talk about there's the flight objections and the fight objections. And so if you're on a call, or when you call someone up out of the blue, they're not expecting your call, and you actually get them on a call, the psychology of the call is, as I talk about it, is it's going to be, they're either going to decide to run away or they're going to stick around. So they're going to flight or they're going to fight. Flight objections that we train to are the 7 or so. Those are the objections that whether you're selling toasters or Teslas, everybody's going to say. This is the, oh crap, I'm on a sales call. I'm going to get out of here. I don't have time. I'm not the right guy. I don't have money. It's those kinds of.
I'm in a meeting. Yeah.
I'm in a meeting. Yeah, exactly. Like it's you're going to hear the same ones over and over. You're the studies. If you go through the studies, you're 95+% assured that one of these, for your organization or for most organizations, that one of these 7 things is going to come out of the person's mouth.
Yeah, it's so funny, and we're shocked that whenever we get these, right? So, all right, got it. So
you gotta have a plan. You gotta train to that, and we do tons of role play, active objection handling to make sure that we can handle these properly.
Now, how about the fight side of it?
So the fight side, this is someone. So when you think about the sales psychology, just stepping back for a quick second, it's the progression that I teach in the 5 to 10 seconds when someone's processing that they're on a sales call before they get to the, oh crap, I'm on a sales call, is basically what they're trying to figure out is, why is this person bothering me? Can they help me? And what do I do about it? Or what's the next step? And so the fight objection satisfies, that's where they're not going to run from you. They're going to stay, or maybe they tried to run and you handled the objection very well. And then now they're going to fight. Now they're going to stick around. They're going to prove to themselves that you can't help them. And darn it, they are going to fight you, and they're going to listen, and they're going to wait for you to say something about budget. They're going to go, aha, that's too expensive. You're too expensive. I can't buy you.
Yeah, or I already have this. So is it like this? I already have this figured out. We're good, right? Yep. So it's that I'm going to fight you and prove that I'm the man or I'm the woman. My ego is going to get in the way. I'm not changing, or I don't believe you can help me.
Absolutely, that is them proving to themselves that you cannot help them, and they need that, need to validate that so they can move on.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's almost like a ego protection. I got to validate that everything I'm doing right. See, you don't know me. And it's kind of curious, especially different personality types, like a C, for example, that in a disc profile, that very exacting type person. I find those to be the most of the ones that will fight to prove that they're right. So it is very curious how that. Okay, so
we train for that. There's actually that's the technical fight objection. So when someone says, "Oh, that's interesting that you do, whatever it is in the space, you're doing healthcare data analytics. Can you?" And then they throw out something that is they're a savvy buyer. They know what they're talking about, and we train for that. Now, here's the thing with the fight objections. You learn over time, and you can have the discussions with your pre-sales folks, with your account executives, with your CSMs. You learn over time what those objections are, and we can build on that. This is where one of the things I want to bring up here is that this is iterative, and you really need to listen, keep taking that feedback in every 90 to 120 days, or 3 to 6 months. You need to get that feedback from your organization, because some of those objections, as your organization evolves and as the market evolves, will change. The flight objections typically do not change. People will always never have time, never have money, not the right person. We already have that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the ones for the fight objections where you got to be paying attention, because those are contextual.
Yeah, and so you see if you would agree with this or not. With the fight objections, those are ones that seem to be easiest to follow up on, because at least they have a stance. whenever somebody won't take a stance, it's hard to get them to move one way or the other. At least the fight objections, you can do something with it.
Absolutely. And one of the things we're training for overall is we give a structure, not a script. We're calling
Yeah.
how. You're not, if you show up and you sound, and I'm talking to you, Brian, it's just very nice to talk. I'm reading from my page about how great we are. I'm never going to convince anybody in VP and higher that remember that they're looking to, if I can help them. If I'm reading from a script, can I help them? Probably not. And so we're teaching the SDRs to eat, but even from out of the gate to ask, we're asking more questions. We're listening more than we're talking. We're really trying to qualify for pain. Does this person have an issue that I think we might be able to solve as a company? And what's the next step from that?
Yeah,
That's what we're
and
looking for.
yeah, I'm kind of homing in on this, Todd. I'm curious on your feedback on this. It seems like there's two types of people that we can engage. Those that, and it seems like you're in this regard where you're always learning, always trying to improve, and open, at least curious to other ideas where you can be, break away from the pack or right. So that's the one side. The other side are those that are in pain and they just need help now. It's that variable in the middle that are in their comfort zone and they're fine with status quo. I can't help those. But if you're open, growth minded, or if you're in immediate pain, those are the two people that we're looking for and we'll continue to follow up on. I don't know if that's what your team is doing or.
Absolutely. There does have to be, timing is important. Receptibility is important, to your point. Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, there is an art and a science of this, and we also train for this as well. And so there is something, and this is something where Greg literally studies this and talks about this. Things like clean speech, duration of speech, so how long you talk, which can be measured in terms of the length of the call. Things like not using fillers, especially for the complex sale. If I call up like a CEO and totally talk about how great my company is, I don't sound confident. I'm using way too many fillers. I can't help that person. That's their perception. And that gets into there's a little bit of science, but that's the art of how I present myself as a salesperson is a real thing. You have to speak with your authentic voice. I've had team members that are challengers who can actually reach out and say to somebody, wait, Brian, you got my email and you didn't find anything interesting or provocative about that? I heard that and I would cringe when I had a former team member. She would do that but she could pull it off and it worked for her. That's part of the art of sales that you can use to your advantage. You have to understand that voice. The science of sales that I teach is when you're on my current team right now, if you make a call between 8 and 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, you are 5 times more likely to book a meeting for that call to convert to a meeting than you are during the average time block.
Interesting. Is that industry specific? Do you think that's, does that change on, I would guess that would change per industry.
Yes. So we're calling, broad, we're calling enterprise at the healthcare level.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of variability. I don't have enough data yet, to be honest, to slice it so thin that I can show you on the BDR level. And my last role, I was able to do that, or the SDR level. I was able to tell each individual SDR, this is your power hour. These are your blocks. And with my current team, I can tell them in general, don't call Mondays and Fridays afternoons. We have literally 0 meetings during those times. The data is there, and these things reveal themselves if you just ask, you just look. It's there. And this is where the sales ops side of the house serves my team really well.
So take those ideas, please. Yes. However, don't make those as excuses, because if you're not getting a hold of anyone, some activity is better than no activity, because at least if you can leave an effective voicemail or an email or something, if that's the only time to call, don't say, well, I heard from Todd and Brian that I shouldn't call between blah, blah, blah. Get after it, for goodness sakes, right? So don't you dare use that as an excuse.
Yes, and absolutely. So there's marketing also sent an email. You left a voicemail 2 days ago that you followed up on, and an email, this morning, and you called this afternoon. There's other things that are going into this. So it's not just the one thing that contributes to getting the meeting is also part of it. And, you can't, these things also change. So this is why I look in every 90 to 120 days. I'm looking at these rolling things, guess what? Those power hours by the individual and by the team will change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and the other thing too here is Todd's looking at this as he's my sense is, and you can correct me here, it doesn't seem like you're looking at this in a linear fashion, or what so many people look for is that silver bullet, magic wand, it's going to fix it all. You seem to be bringing in the dynamics of this, the complexity of it, and bringing a holistic picture to it to solve the real problem, not a bunch of band-aids.
Not a bunch of band-aids. If someone's telling you that they have the email template, that there is one time absolutely for everybody to use to call, that there is one voicemail to leave, they're probably selling you something. I applaud them for their efforts. It's most likely. I've read those things too. I've been chased by the purple hippo. I've been all those things. I personally don't use those things because we haven't had to. We come from, part of our culture is that we're calling, these large enterprises, Fortune 500s, large health systems, these organizations that I've had the pleasure of selling to in the past, trying to help them do something they need to do. I have tremendous respect for these folks that are running these companies. I'm going to approach them where I think they'd like to be approached. So more of the platinum role. I'm going to try to speak to them at their level so I don't get delegated down to someone else's level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you get pushed down to the level you sound is an old adage. So, all right, got it. Now, you said that you don't do scripts, and I'll leave it here, but my gosh, we could go hours and hours on this. You said you don't do scripts, but you do, I think you said process, or you don't do scripts, you do?
Structure, not script.
Structure, not script. So talk to us a little bit about that structure. What's that structure look like?
Absolutely. So it's the objection handling that we talked about.
Okay.
Also, as part of that objection handling, when you get into a savvy buyer, like you said, that receptible buyer, that when you're getting into that fight objection loop that Greg Casale talks about, 2 to 5 minute conversation generally, where you're giving and getting information. At some point, you can't just ask questions because it becomes an interrogation. You have to offer information, and part of that information helps dispel some of the myths. So it could be, oh, I'm thinking, I'm the buyer, I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna nail you. You are way too expensive. I'm gonna prove it. And they say, hey, just whisper in my ear. Just give me a ballpark. What's the price? They're trying to get the price out of you. Our product, it's a platform. It scales depending on what they're looking to do. There's many facets of it that they can choose to use or not. And so to give them a price in a vacuum, we can't do. What we can do is we can tell them, hey, look, what our customers like about us is it's the pricing scales depending on what the individual needs.
Right.
Happy to set up that time to talk about what you're looking to do with this. I think I heard you say, and it's a lot of repackaging like you're doing on this call, and it's throwing in that nugget of trying to dispel the thinking, the objection of you're too expensive. Well, actually, the pricing scales. Or can you do this one thing? What we do is we train the BDR over time. There's actually learning that's embedded in their daily schedule. There's about 10% learning time that's, and I can talk about how we divide that up. They will get smarter at some point in the future. At some point probably within their first 3 to 6 months of doing this, because they ramp through the first 90 days, they will be able to answer that very technical question that person asked. Until they do, though, we train them how to interact with how to overcome the objection.
Right. So, yeah, and I like that. So, a couple of ways is meet them where they're at, giving ranges, right? So, hey, whisper in my ear, how much is this? It's a lot, right? But let's talk through this. I have no idea if the business case is there. If it's not, who knows? But, what's a typical what's the typical time of return on investment, a time of payback? Let's talk through that. And if that business case isn't there, let's skip it, right?
Absolutely. The folks that we're calling, you bring up such a good point. The folks that we're calling at the top, the very highest point, VP and higher in that pyramid, running these massive organizations. In general, what I found is they care about 3 things. They care about, can I make more money? They care about, can I keep more money? And basically, can I stay out of jail, or can I avoid risk?
Yeah, can I keep my job?
Right, exactly. Can you distill those things down then when we talk about that persona, the message, the context? And then I say, person who's the VP of running this part of that health system or of that corporation, if they're trying to make more money and we have a solution that does that, I'm not going to talk about, I don't need to name off the solution. I can say, hey, look, we're helping other individuals at other organizations very similar to yours do the benefit thing that the product. It's not about us. It's not about the features of our product. It's about the result for the person to do the thing that they need to do.
Yeah. What problem are you going to solve for me?
Right. And this is
Right.
why I don't teach the BDRs the 18 magical features that our product has. Because as salespeople, what do we love to do? We love to jump in the car as soon as the person shows up in the car lot, and I'm going to show you how fast we get from 0 to 60. And did I tell you how many cylinders this baby has? And look at all the cup holders, and look at we got a moonroof. And look, I mean, you look at it's got blind spot monitoring. We want to show the features, right? The person they might have accidentally stumbled out of the car lot. They might not even need a car.
Yeah, right. They were
You know what I
lost.
mean? So we jump the features. It actually works in the BDRs or the SDRs' favor to not know the features because they can't use that as a crutch. They have to ask and listen.
Correct. So, notice what Todd's doing here. He's asking a lot of questions. So, if you are in love with those 18 features, everything that you want to say, figure out how to ask it in the question, right? Figure out of those 18 features, what's the problem that it solves, and then tie that back, map that back to that specific person, right? How does that feature solve a problem for their specific job function?
Absolutely. What does it allow you to do that you can't do now? Or what is it about that current feature that you have that you mentioned to me, because you said you already covered, what are you not getting out of that you'd love to? If you could wave your magic wand, what could you get out of that feature or that thing that you can't get today?
Yeah, no one's perfect to include us, but what's one thing that if you could fix, and I'm not saying we can, what's one thing that you could fix that you would like to do better? So we'll absolutely love that. So do you have a couple more minutes? I'll hit this and
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, appreciate it. So I think it's at least worth mentioning. How do you break up the day of your team? Because you had a unique structure for that. We'll hit that and we'll rapid fire the rest of these questions.
Absolutely. So it's roughly a third, a third, and a third. And so you're going to spend about a third of your time sourcing, about a third of your time doing outreach, and about a third of your time prepping and learning. I want to make that part of the day, and I really emphasize that. I'm a big fan of coaching, and you can actually break down the learning piece. I'll focus on that for a second. You can break down the learning piece very, very specifically, where I talk about there's the sales learning. There's the how to become a better sales professional. There is the company level learning, how you get smarter about what we do. And then there's the industry learning. How do you get smarter about what's going on in the world that affects us as a business? So, and those things, you can break that down. Listening into a demo that's further down the line than just the discovery call, which I already have the SDRs sit in on. That's an example of learning a little bit more about the company, for example. So you can break that down. And by the way, there's not a set. I give a lot of autonomy. I set a starter or a recommended schedule from day one that I give to the SDRs, and then that's the plan from which we deviate. And how we deviate from that is when I say, by the way, team, we booked 0 meetings on Monday and Friday afternoons, and we booked the majority of our calls between in the mornings on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. You're going to want to have more calls and more of your required dials for that week. Go ahead and schedule more of those in those call blocks on your Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursday mornings. Don't schedule them on Mondays and Friday afternoons.
Yeah,
it just makes sense. So you're going to deviate from that, and again, that's also going to change over time. So we want to be mindful of that.
Got it. Okay, so don't be so regimented. Have fluidity and also adaptability off of that. Love it. All right. So, oh my gosh, we could go all day long. You look like you had one more thing to say on that.
I was just going to say, salespeople. I'm also trying. These folks are our current talent bench. Ideally for sales, I'm very selfish with talent. I put a lot, put my heart and soul into training and coaching and all these things, getting these folks that have never sold to where they're darn good at what they do. I want to keep them for my company, right?
Right.
I want them out there selling, because how much better than someone who understands our CRM, our processes, our product, our company, our people, our culture, etc. Let's keep them here. And so one of the things I can do to help them that they don't even know I'm helping them toward that career progression is I can teach them how to be an autonomous and effective salesperson, how to manage their own time effectively to get the results that they want. They're going to have to do that as an AE.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's gold right there. Take that nugget. So based upon everything that you built out, let me rapid fire this. What's one thing that you've learned, a hard lesson learned that we should take and avoid in our future? So how can we stop? How can we not get hurt like you did?
We heard the hire slowly, fire quickly.
Yeah,
I am the word again. I support versus sever just naturally. I will I take it upon myself. I will coach the heck out of you until until you can get it. Because I can train you. If you show me you want it, I can train you the things. I can train you all the sales things, the skills. I've learned that sometimes that's not the case. Some folks can't pick it up. They can't close that gap quickly enough. And I've held on too long in the past, and it hurts that person, and it hurts the team. The team learns. They say as a leader, you're judged by what you allow or what you accept, the exceptions you make.
Right.
In the past, I've been guilty of making too many exceptions, and my A players and my B players notice when I'm letting my C players slide because I'm hanging on too long. Don't do it.
Yeah, I've heard it put this way: the first time that you think of letting somebody go, you're probably 3 months behind.
Yeah.
So,
and it's hard. These are people. I'm a person. This is hard. All right.
It's a work
Keeping
part
that
of the
person
job.
doesn't do them any good. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do your team any good.
100%. And they'll actually thank you for it a lot of times because they're like, oh, thank heavens. I was horrible at this. I was trying so hard. I just couldn't get it. Yeah. Now, how about one business hack, whether it's from talent, hiring, sales tactics, scaling of the business, especially on the operations side? What's one quick hack one quick hack or advice, whatever you want to call it?
Get the team calling quickly and use real accounts. Don't be afraid. There's no such thing as, well, if I could screw up this account if I call. If it's a prospect, it's a prospect. Someone from that company needs to reach out. Do it real time with your BDRs. Do not do fake accounts. Give them real accounts. Do training. The training is intense. It takes about a week that I do. Get them calling. So if you start on Monday and you go through Friday, Monday morning the next week, they're calling real accounts because they've been sourcing real people at those accounts. Get them on the phones. Get their feet wet.
Yeah, because here's a funny thing. They're not going to remember you. 2 weeks from now, they're not going to remember you. You're not that important. So
unless you do something really, really good or really, really terrible, you're totally right. And those things are so unlikely. They won't remember. Sometimes you can call them back a few days later and they won't remember that you called.
100%, 100%. So any resources that you might recommend, books, podcasts, guides that we should dive into?
So many. I've mentioned a couple. Amy Volas, follow her. Obviously, this podcast, I think you are doing great work. I love the work that you're doing. I love Ryan's work and others that have been on here that I've listened to. Absolutely love it. Trish Bertuzzi, if you are a sales development leader and you have not read the Sales Development Playbook, please fix that. Get yourself a copy right now. Greg Casale, I mentioned, especially the science of sales development, the art and the art part of it as well. He is fantastic at that. There is Jeb Blunt is a great resource. If you haven't read his 2 books, which are Fanatical Prospecting and Objections, get yourself copies. Have your entire team read it if you're a leader. Those are invaluable resources.
Yep, and, love it.
Yeah, I'd say those are the big ones.
Those are really good. And then from a future perspective, what are you looking at? What are you worrying about? What are you trying to anticipate coming down the pike?
Always making sure that we're being relevant and we're speaking to people where they are. All of this, and this is why I say there's no, you talk about it too, there is no silver bullet. Right now, my company supports the healthcare industry with everything that's going on in the healthcare industry. When they weren't dealing with people in beds and COVID and trying to deal with that, now they're distributing vaccines. They got a lot on their plate. And oh, by the way, our product is not a caregiving or provider. We are not right there in the hospital giving care. So making sure that you understand that there is, again, not as an excuse, but just we're talking to people as human beings. You have to remain relevant and you have to understand that there is context. Take a minute to look at what you're putting out there in the world as an organization and as a person, and realize that someone is going to respond to that at an emotional level just as much, if not more so, as they're going to respond to how can this help me. They're also thinking, what am I dealing with right now? Yeah. If you can't connect with them at that level, and I know for those who are like, oh, that's really touchy-feely. Trust me, it's not. We're human beings. We will respond emotionally to things. If you can just stop for a minute and talk to someone as a human, while also keeping in mind that you might be able to help them do something they're willing to do, you're probably going to get a lot more favorable response.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time here, Todd. We're running over here, but hopefully it's well worth it to everybody listening. Got a ton out of this. So last question, Todd, who should reach out to you? How should they do it? And why in the world should people reach out to you here?
Yeah, especially if you want to talk about all the things, how to really kind of operationalize all those, I threw out some stats on this call. I do progression and conversion-based coaching with my team. I'm looking at number of contacts and titles, down to connects and down to conversations, down to meetings scheduled. I'm looking at conversion to meetings delivered for your show up rate, and I'm looking at converted to deals.
Yeah.
And from top to bottom, I'm looking at that math and I'm coaching at each one of those levels. If you don't know where to start, if you're thinking, man, I'd really like to take the information that's already in my CRM around what my team's doing, I don't know what quite to do with it. toddr@stratasan.com is my business email address. So that's toddr@ and then Stratasan is STRATASAN.com. Just please reach out. I would love to help you at least get started. We'll talk for 30 minutes and you'll be on your way.
Yeah, and I guess you're on LinkedIn, right?
And I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out, DM me on LinkedIn.
RODE. It's spelled or pronounced a little bit differently. So perfect. Well, hey Todd, I cannot thank you enough. Jeff Leiniger, thanks for the introduction. Well worth the time here. So appreciate it, everyone. A lot of stuff here. Decipher it, figure out how to apply it, and get after it. Have some fun while you're doing it. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks, Brian.